There is a saying in the disability community that goes, before ramping buildings, you got to ramp attitudes. In Genesis, God first creates containers, that is land, sky, and water. Then God fills those containers with animals, heavenly bodies, and fish. After that, God creates Adam and Eve. For those of us in the disability community, it is important to understand Adam and Eve's bodies as containers themselves. For we are also taught in Pirkei Avot, do not look at the container, but rather look at what is inside of it. We must all recognize people with disabilities as people first. We must look beyond the disability, beyond the container, and see the person within, the person with often unacknowledged and therefore untapped potential. Thank you. Thank you, all of you, for being here and keeping the doors of Abraham's tent open wide. Thank you for being here at this, for lack of a better word, tent warming.
How would you like to follow her? My task today is to talk to you about how to bring the right people to the table. I wish that there was an easy inclusion formula with which to leave you. When it comes to this topic, I first think about Moses. I know Abraham's tent, I'm a forward thinker. I think about that burning bush that was not consumed. Had the bush been burning for a long time and Moses was just the first passerby to see it? Or did it burst into flames as he walked by so that he had no alternative but to see it? When exactly does a community take notice of its members with disabilities that are around them at all times? Is it the raging parent who finally gets the attention of an agency or communal leader? Is it the local agency leader who has a grandchild born with educational and social needs that are only being met by the local church? For me, the awareness of that burning bush was when my local agency, Jewish Family Service, went through a strategic planning process in 2006. We asked a broad spectrum of Jewish agency leaders and staff to give us input on issues that they thought JFS should be focusing on in the following 3 years. There was a lone, quiet voice that spoke up during one of those sessions. Her name is Diane Bresner, and she's an 8-hour-a-week employee of the Jewish Federation's Bureau of Jewish Education. She works with families with children with disabilities. Diane shared the frustrations of these families, and as a result, JFS stepped in and ran focus groups with the parents she referred us to. We listened and we began to make plans to help. Some requests were relatively simple. For example, we heard that it was very difficult for the families to identify which resources were available in the community. So I approached a lay leader who had absolutely no knowledge of disabilities and asked her if she would help me put together a Jewish guide, a Jewish and non-Jewish guide of programs in the Houston area for these families. The project intrigued her. She saw the need, and she put together a lay committee of like-minded volunteers, extraordinary men and women who produced this guide. We thought it would take 2 months. It took 9. But when we published the guide the first time online, we had 30,000 hits in the first month. We found that copies of the guide, and we didn't make copies, but all of a sudden we found copies of this guide in offices all throughout the city, private schools and other institutions who were hungry for something like this. By the way, we're very excited to be hosting Real Abilities in February, and the Disability Services Alexander Institute for Inclusion will be providing thumb drives for everybody who comes to a movie with the updated guide. We found something else in the focus groups that touched our hearts and our minds. The parents of these children, especially the ones who had kids in their early 20s, were going through a new kind of shock. We mentioned it last night. These parents had been tireless advocates for their children 24/7 for the past 20+ years. One evening, the reality hits them that their child is still sitting across the table from them in the dining room. Only now, there are no mandated school programs, no jobs, and no place for them to go. These focus group parents, their anger and frustration at the Houston Jewish community had peaked. Some of them were completely resigned that there would never, ever be a Jewish place for their child. Others were just numb. I think this one story, which I carry with me to this day, illustrates exactly how they felt, and I'm going to quote this mother. The Jewish community has special campaigns to save the Russians, the Ethiopians, the Argentinians, and it runs emergency campaigns for Israel all the time. Heck, our community even helped the South Africans absorb into a good life. When will it be my son's turn? When will the community run a special campaign for him? How am I supposed to respond when he asks me, what is going to happen to me when you die, Mommy? That was a 37-year-old man asking his mom, what's going to happen to me? Needless to say, listening to those parents opened my eyes, and I saw for the first time the bush that burned but was not consumed. Simultaneously, while JFS was having focus groups and developing an online guide, Lee Wunsch, Jewish Federation's CEO and president, was implementing a collaborative fundraising model at the Federation. As he was out cultivating donors, he learned about a couple that was interested in stamping out stigma and providing programs and services for those with disabilities. We were invited to apply for a grant, and it was a perfect match. Although we have developed many programs and services, I need to focus on my topic, which is how to bring the right people to the table for a more inclusive community. You don't always get to choose who will be sitting at the table, and the journey itself is not always what you expect. You need to be able to hear the voices around you, the still small voices or the loud, angry ones. You need partners. They may be very detail-oriented, focused, and concrete, like the many volunteers who helped develop the online guide. Or they may be the connectors to funders and other funding sources. They may be the baby boomer with lots of time on their hands, and they may truly understand the concept of building an inclusive community. Or they may be the very one who needs to learn. You need to be willing to make mistakes, not to meet everyone's needs, although I keep trying, to take risks and to fail. You need to have a partner, or you need to be a partner. Since the evolution of disability services began with JFS in Houston, we have become the central address for these issues. However, in many communities, it's the Federation who takes the lead. We created a coalition of related agencies. We continue to bring together all of the direct service providers of disability services within the Jewish community. These include the JCC, the Bureau of Jewish Education, the Chabad Friendship Circle, the Federation, day schools, Yachad, and rabbis. Our funders, in their wisdom, allowed us to provide funding directly to coalition partners in an effort to increase services to this population. We funded a part-time program at the JCC for 3 years to expand services for kids. We provided funding to the Bureau of Jewish Education for innovative programs in the day schools and religious schools. We have an advisory board with warriors for greater inclusion. The advisory board members changes as we become more sophisticated and in our approach. We do small things like closed captioning for most major and minor community events. We try to change minds by creating memorandums of understanding that require agencies to fully fund the closed captioning within 3 years of taking our grants. We have provided babysitting at community-wide events for children with disabilities so that their parents and their siblings can participate fully in what the community has to offer. We increase awareness by hosting major community programs with experts and inspirational leaders like Rabbi Lynn Lansberg, Shelley Christensen, Rabbi Bradley Artson, Rabbi Sean Fields Myers. We provide staff support to those synagogues willing to establish inclusion committees. We have partnered with other experts within our national network so that our community does not have to reinvent the wheel. We found particular synergies with West Palm Beach and Los Angeles. And we have used Los Angeles' inclusion expert, Sally Weber, on a regular basis to help us in our synagogue work. We face challenges and our own shortcomings. The language itself is very hard to learn. People use wheelchairs. They are not bound to them. Their disability does not define who they are. You wouldn't say, he is a broken leg. Yet, how often do you hear someone say, she's a schizophrenic? Would you say she's a heart attack? Using people-first language is a skill, and it has to be practiced, and still you will make mistakes. We have learned so many hard lessons at JFS in the last year alone, and we're supposed to be the experts. A wheelchair user was in our supposedly ADA accessible bathroom. She panicked exiting the bathroom because she thought she was the last person in the building, and her chair got stuck in the door, and we couldn't move the door, and we couldn't move the chair. And it was a terrible experience, and she was there for an inclusion meeting. So, as a result, I'm sure you understand we made some changes. Another time we were facilitating a synagogue inclusion committee meeting in a private home. A guest of the committee, who no one knew, came, and she was not able to ascend the 6 stairs through the front door. So immediately the inclusion committee made a decision and moved to another home in the area. Again, very uncomfortable for the individual and terribly uncomfortable for the committee, but they did the right thing and certainly didn't leave her out. Finally, we became aware that our door at our building was really hard for frail, elderly, and wheelchair users to access it. So we went into building fund dollars and made sure our doors had those push buttons and easily accessible. To sum up, you have to become aware of the burning bush in your community. Listen to the quiet and the not so quiet voices. Start small and just do something, anything to begin. Look to the national resources and bring those best practices to your city. Coordinate and talk to your sister agencies, institutions, and synagogues to identify gaps in services. And finally, this is not a project with a beginning, middle, and an end. It is an ongoing effort with highs and lows, ups and downs. It is sacred work, and it is a privilege to be a part of it. I will end with the story with which I began. Jewish federations have had many operations, Exodus, Moses, and Solomon, just to name a few. Let today be the beginning of a new one, and let's call it Operation Shalom. We all know what shalom means, but the root can also be found in the word shalom, which means wholeness. As we work to include everyone in our communities, we will indeed reach shalom. Thank you.
Good morning. My assignment is to speak about organizing our community to move from concept to action. And I have to mirror what Linda had to say about kind of the history in our community and say that it was our parents who came to us after having come to the Jewish community when their children were young and being told, we don't have programs, we don't have children in the community with disabilities, we don't have any money for these programs, and then sort of going away and then having the experience of advocating for their children tirelessly in their school experiences, and then when their children became young adults, having the strength and koach to come back to us and say, we want a program in our community. And we had a lot of work to do to acknowledge that we had been wrong, to say that you're right, we need to come together and move forward. And that took quite a bit of effort and time, and because people were so frustrated. But the parents took that frustration and moved it into energy for a positive outcome because they were thinking about their children. And we really listened. We owned up to our mistakes again and again. We dealt with their frustration, and we dealt with their frustration around being able to move forward quickly enough, because we had a large number of organizations to bring together, and every community is unique, and the Minneapolis Jewish community is a pretty small community. We have about 35,000 Jews. We have 7 or 8 organizations that were involved in this process. And so what were the ingredients of organizing our community to move forward? We had our parents. We had a visionary funder, the Phillips Foundation, that gave us a large grant decreasing over 4 years to get this program started. We had great cooperation between our JFCS and our federation that were sort of the organizers of this effort. And a federation that was willing to step up as the grant dollars decreased to supplement those dollars with funding from the community. We had private donors, and we had so much of this is about people. It's about the people who stepped up, about the people who were involved, about the people who are so talented to give of their time and their energy. We had a committee chair that brought this group together with the time and the commitment, and she worked tirelessly to bring people together. And then we had the ability of those families to move on and to focus on what we were trying to do in the community. One of the ingredients that you need is the right staff person to organize and facilitate this effort. We were in a hurry. We hired the wrong staff person, and that set us back for 9 months to a year. And then we hired the right staff person, Shelley, and we have been so fortunate to have her in our community. So finally, we brought a group of people together, which included the MRA, our Rabbinical Association, JFCS, the JCC, and I have to say the JCC was a challenge. They kept saying, oh yes, we want to be there, and they didn't show up. But we kept after them, and today our JCC is a beacon of inclusive programming. We had our senior housing organization, we had the federation, and we had organizations from the general community. Then we did a needs assessment in the community, which was something that Federation really wanted to do. We wanted to move forward. They wanted to do this needs assessment. We had done it previously, so we did the needs assessment. We found out exactly what we knew we were going to find out. But the needs assessment served as a vehicle to market to the community that we were involved in working on this kind of initiative. And when we submitted the grant to the foundation, they insisted that we visit San Francisco. We also visited Becca to see what kind of programming was going on in other parts of the country. And in San Francisco, what we learned that there was fabulous programming of services for people with disabilities. And we learned from Becca about how she had developed her program. And we came back, and what we decided is that what we wanted to do was develop an inclusion program, and that different organizations would have their areas of expertise that would provide services. But we wanted to work on not so much the physical barriers, but the attitudinal barriers that existed in our community. And Shelley developed a PowerPoint that we took around to every single organization that was tailored to that organization and personalized to that organization, talking about how to work on your organization's ability to become an inclusive organization. And we every single organization, every single synagogue developed an inclusion committee. Those groups, that the chairs of those committees came together and met to share best practices. And then as time went on, our committee disbanded. Each one of the organizations was working on their own programs. JFS was doing case management. We had a program that did social recreational programming for people with disabilities. The JCC started working in their camp, and they started doing other inclusive programs, recreation, fitness programming for people with disabilities. We had another visionary leader in our community that developed a program that worked with kids to help them get mainstreamed into all the Jewish schools, supplemental and day schools in the community. Our synagogues began working on their programs, and so each of the organizations was doing their own work. And now we have once again formed a coalition and are coming together to do some strategic planning, some visioning, and this is very exciting so that we won't have overlap. Another thing that came out of this was we have no housing, Jewish housing, in Minneapolis for people with disabilities, and one of the parents has worked tirelessly to make this reality. And it's moving forward, it's gonna happen, and the new executive director of that organization is here. It's called Jewish Housing and Program. Jen Lewin is our new executive director, and we are so excited to see that develop in our community. So we are working together now to bring all of our organizations together once again and to move to the next phase so that we can work together to collaborate, not to have duplication of services, and to go together for funding, and that's where we're at. We make mistakes every day, as Lynn said. So many of the things that she said have also happened in our community, and we just continue to try to move forward.